Oh yeah, since I moved to America, the first thing I noticed was the the way kids disrespected the teachers. Because in my country, they will give you a whooping in front of everybody. In Jamaica, they don't really. It's only black people, so if someone hated you, they just hated you because of just you being you. Um, so I never really was seen as black and white. I only saw black. And then when I came to America, I had to be taught the other things. Because believe it or not, it was the black Americans that made me know I was black. I ain't gonna lie. They was the one that was. Because I had my accent, I had a strong accent. Um, they were the ones that made me know, oh, me and you are different. And then when we got to high school, we had African American history. Then they made me know that everyone sees me as different. So the cultural thing was just me just have to see how things are done here. You could talk to other people and see what they cared about and how different it was. But that's why I was like always friends with like it wasn't a lot, but the Puerto Ricans and the Africans is our culture was more similar. So I got closer to them than actual Americans.
So I lived in Russia until I was 15 years old. A lot of Americans have assumptions about me that do not represent the reality. It happened when I started going to my freshman year of high school here in the United States, and there were kids of a different ethnical background compared to myself telling me that I'm a guest here and that I should go home and that I do not belong in this country. My first realization that this place is messed up happened pretty early on. Just to give you some perspective, living in Russia, everybody has this perfect image of what America is like, and it's this perfect place with freedom, equality, unlimited opportunities for everybody to make it and live a happy life. And once I came down here, I realized that it is not so much different from Russia than I thought. The way it worked in Russia is that prior to the communist revolution, everybody was a slave. Literally everybody. You could not own property. Uh, you work for your master, and that's pretty much your life, unless you were born, belonging to a different class. And Russia's always been a multicultural country. There are more than 100 different ethnic groups living in Russia since day one. USSR and a lot of African countries used to be allies, so many Africans could go to Russia to study for free to get a quality education, and a lot of them stayed and formed families. So there is a black community in Russia, and it's particularly big in a city like Moscow. So that definitely helped me to be more open-minded, and I never even realized what my race is until I moved to the United States.
I was originally born in America, but at a young age, I immigrated back to Africa, and I was staying there with my grandparents. And in that area, I was mainly around other Africans as well. And that was my life for a short period of time before I came back to the States and state of Minnesota in a mainly predominantly white area. After I left Minnesota and came to Ohio, especially living in Cleveland, I became way more aware of my race. Because when I lived in Minnesota around predominantly white people, I didn't feel that sense because I was younger and I really didn't pay attention to it. But as I got older and I lived in Ohio and Cleveland more, I for sure became more aware of it. I think this is one thing that I see a lot, especially for like when people think of racism, there's like an archetypical person that they see, like straight white guy. You know what I'm saying? Like you see that a lot. When I have some conversations with people that's like more left-leaning, they usually like that's mainly like their archetype. And on the individual level, on average, white people aren't racist for real. They're on an individual level. Most people see themselves as good people. So when they're being like constantly accused of being racist, when they themselves believe that they haven't done any racial actions and stuff like that, and most times they have not, and they're already being preset and being like shown prejudice. If you're told for a long time, you're like even for black people are demonized by white people about being thugs, ghetto, stuff like that, and then they end up falling into that because you already see me as that, so might as well act in the same way. I think it's the same thing in the other side as well, where like people of color and stuff like that, or like, ethnic groups or things, or they demonize white people or other racial groups, and then when they do become the thing that they like prejudice against, they're like surprised. They're like, "Oh, why are you acting this way?" You almost like gave them no other route because you've only pushed them further down that mindset.
When it comes to people being like ignorant, the biggest thing for me is where you grow up. Like, if you grow up in places that are predominantly one race, then you're not going to have a whole lot of like interactions with people of other races. So when you finally do, either you move away or you go on vacation somewhere and you meet those people, then you think that they're like they are in that movie you saw. The earliest I can remember thinking somebody looked different from me was I was at the library, and there was like a woman, and she had like the dot on her head, and I asked like, "Hey, why do you have a big red dot on your head?" And she was like, "Oh," and she seemed a bit flustered, but like my grandma like pulled me aside. It's like, "That's not okay to say." I was like, "Why?" She just kind of like explained it to me, and I feel like that's the earliest I can like remember thinking like, "Oh shoot, I never really thought about people like looking different from me before."
Even where I live right now, you don't see a lot of like different community and like culture other than like white suburban, and it's sad, to be honest. But like whenever I go to places, and especially at Kent, there's like so many different diverse outlooks. I think all people got to do is just stop believing like everything that you hear from like your parents, because they were growing up on like a different time and times are changing. So talk to people. Words are very powerful, and it's hard to get a lot of different people on the same page, just in general too, but when it comes to different cultures and different races, there's a lot of different opinions, especially from like white culture to black culture. It can be tricky.